Thank you.
So today I am with Zachary, who is one of our speakers for the Writers Festival. How you going today, Zach?
Yeah, I'm really good. Thanks, Rhiannon. And yourself?
Yeah, very well. I would love to know more about the books that you've written. So
Yeah, okay,
please.
sure. I'm not sure where to start. I guess I'll talk about the most recent book. I might even have a copy right here. Actually, I do. When the Cicadas stop singing, because my room's a mess. This is an Aurealis-nominated novella,
Oh,
which
fantastic.
I was really proud about that one. It came out last year in September, and it's a sort of a post-apocalyptic thriller slash horror. And it's sort of set in the mountains, the hinterland of sort of the Gold Coast area, out towards the border. And basically, there's a woman living out there. She's kind of the lone survivor of her family. She decided when sort of the end of the world as we know it hit, she sort of went out into the mountains to a campsite she knew with her son. Unfortunately, her son is now in a can there,
Oh no.
buried. He's surviving alone, hasn't seen people for a long time. And one day, as she returns from a hunt, she comes back and there's a man there pointing a gun at her. He's got another lady with him. And then there's a game of cat and mouse in this. And just to make things worse, the post-apocalyptic world is full of predatory lizard people who hunt people down as well. So that's quite it's very fast. It's action packed, but it's got a lot of pathos in it as well. So it's a really interesting read, and it's been received really well, which is fantastic. Prior to that, I have had a couple of other novellas released through Unnerving. They're a Canadian publisher. Their Rewind or Die line, and this was an homage to kind of 80s B-grade horror movies. And these ones, there's one here actually. I didn't even plan this. This is just because I'm always doing things. They're called the Soul Survivor series.
Ooh.
And the premise of the first one, it's quite comedic, although it's also quite gory. Is as reality TV show contestants are sent to a kind of a survivor type setup on an island. What they don't know is that island is also full of drop bears.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. It's really fast paced. It was kind of received pretty well, which surprised me. It was my first kind of novella that was released, and released as part of a collection that had some really fantastic authors who've gone on to do great things. So it was a real honor to be part of that as well. So that was really cool. There's a sequel to that where I actually bring that to the mainland, and we find out a bit more about the origin of these drop bears and the motives of the people behind it, that kind of thing.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and then there's just some smaller things, some short stories as well, and just fun. I like my creature features, I like my horror, and I like to see what I can do with that to provide comment about the world around us, which is something I do a lot of, I guess, in what I do. So yeah.
I feel like horror is one of the genres that's really able to exhibit that in a way that gets people feeling something a lot better than I don't know, maybe it's because horror is just a bit more popular than just political thrillers and that sort of stuff. Maybe it's because the others get a bit too preachy too quickly. But when you've got horror and that it represents something else, and that symbolism is something that's really powerful with different audiences.
Yeah, I think, and some people always go, "Oh, or why horror?" And it's kind of that question you always get. But I think what is, like you said, so powerful about it is that dual nature. It can work on that really kind of surface level of, oh yeah, there's something either supernatural or abnormal about the world that's happening. But then also when you start bringing in and looking at the analysis of that, you can see a lot of that stuff, and it really comes back to, I guess, the origins of the genre as well, but what it means to move people. I've done a lot of reading and viewing on things, and we know that it's a genre that tends to explode when the world's in turmoil a bit and people want to provide comment and things like that. So it's really interesting to look at as a genre and its history and how popular it is, although it's always kind of been the outcast, I guess, of the literary genres as well. So,
mm-hmm. There is a I think a lot of people do horror badly, where it either doesn't hit the right notes to get the feelings that the author is after out of the audience. So it can become quite comical after that. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's intentional and that's fun, but other times it's not, and it's, it just doesn't hit the right notes. But other times I feel like it hits too close to home and is too revealing for people, which can cause that reaction within them. There's a saying that whatever you don't like, you either wish, like there's a jealousy where you wish you had part of that thing that you don't like within you, whether it's the courage to speak out or the naivety to, say stupid things. Or it is you are seeing something in yourself that you wish wasn't there. And so I feel like when I see particular horrors, it's either it's a similar thing where you either wish that you had the audacity to do certain things, or you completely think, oh my God, I hate that little part inside of me and I want to deny it. Why are they showing me that reflection?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It definitely is a genre that speaks of human nature, as it is, I guess, is a really good way to put it, and to bring that out of people to talk about those things. Some movies, just you can watch them, or books you can read, they actually make you angry. They're so visceral, like you said, that kind of thing. You're like, oh wow, that's actually left me with this kind of really kind of, and I think that's where the psychological horrors, which are really, really effective, are best in making you realize that this is part of human nature and we don't necessarily like it, and it's uncomfortable, but it's also there in who we are. And then, as you said, there's that other side of horror, which I think it's always interesting, like because I'm a big fan of trashy movies, but I just think, to expand on what you said, sometimes when it's intentional, that's perfect. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but I think if we're laughing at something we're not supposed to laugh at, that's something we can go, okay, well, no, you've lost it there. Not to rag on movies, but there was a big franchise movie that was a remake, recall, sequel kind of thing recently, and I was watching it with my wife, and we were just like, this is just awful, and it wasn't comedic, it didn't make sense, and we were just like, but why would you make that choice? Whereas we also we love the trauma movies, which Toxic Avenger and Nukem High, which are so ridiculously silly and B grade, but there's actually a lot of quality in what they're doing. And so if you do get those notes wrong, as you've said, it can just really ruin the whole experience for everybody. I agree completely. So yeah.
So what brought you into horror? Like, when did you start writing horror? Or
I guess
touching into horror? Because it sounds like what you do is a lot of action as well.
Yeah, look, I think it's always really interesting to look at the purpose of the action. I do like action sequences and action scenes, and they're fun to write and fun to read. For me, I always think, and I've talked about this with another friend before, I came to horror through monsters and things like that. And I actually think that side of things for me came from being a fan of reading Greek mythology.
Yes.
And we were talking about it, and one of the other authors I know, he's based in the States, Max Smith III. He talks about how you look at Indiana Jones and it's got zombies and skeletons and snakes and all those things that are tropes of horror, but there's not one aspect of it that you go, this is horrific. It's the lens we watch it on. But when we start using those for the purpose where it's not adventure, it is made to unsettle, or the focus is on the creepiness, the abnormality, and those things, I think that's what really appeals to me. I like in horror how we can, as we've sort of mentioned before, touch on other things with it. But that monster aspect, and also I think the other thing I think that is so powerful with horror and what makes it so appealing is it's also, a lot of people will describe it as a flavor you can add to different genres. So some of the best horrors aren't even necessarily horrors. There's so many different kinds. It's kind of almost like metal music, I think. It's just alternative, and it's a little bit extreme in some aspects, but we can put that flavor into that genre, and all of a sudden the lens we're using is different, and it makes a different kind of sense. Whereas an action movie, that edge of your seat, the hero's journey aspect of things, where we look at how we can be victorious and be better people, as opposed to horror, which might be like, well, no, we're looking at maybe a tragic structure. We're looking at these aspects of storytelling that ask us to, have pity and things like that. So some of those other emotions are what are targeted, I think, and that appeals to me. I think I'm also a teacher, so I talk a lot. I'm sorry.
No, it's great. It's great. It makes my job easy.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, no, because I'm also a teacher, one of the things that we talk about a lot is in the great literary text that we put in front of students, why do they all have sad endings? And that's because they're talking
that's
about
what I used to
humanity.
ask.
But I think when you look at so much of the great literature that's resonated for hundreds of years and the themes, that's what it's talking about, is what it means to be human. And a lot of that horror touches on is facing those things that we might not necessarily enjoy, but we have to come to terms with. And those questions of why, we don't tend to ask why we're having fun. We tend to ask why things suck. And I think there's something in that, maybe. But yeah,
it's interesting because there's a few horror definitely leans on tragedy quite a lot. It leans on the finale for a lot of horror is a sense of impending doom or continuation of the fear. You might have a moment of relief at the end, but then you get a sneaking suspicion that you have not dealt with the darkness. You have not defeated the monster, that it's still lurking out there, or that you were defeated, like the main character that you're putting yourself into, that they were eventually defeated, which is something that really tips it tips a lot of stuff on its head. I was just thinking, I think my favorite form of horror is when the protagonist sympathizes with the monster. So I love Monster of the Week. I absolutely love it. Like original Supernatural, like the first season of Supernatural where it was Monster of the Week. Amazing. I don't know. After season 4, it just kind of went off the rails. That's a really good point, because the entire US had a writer's strike when season 5 came out. So I think that, and that was also around the same time that the Heroes franchise, which had some great horror elements in it. It was the first TV show I'd ever seen that actually made me like scream with a bit of fright. But yeah, that devolved when writer's strike happened as well. And that's why that all went to pot. But I find that when you eventually find a common ground with the monster, I think Hannibal Lecter is a good example of that. When there's another one, I think it's a very poorly written one. I think it's called Dragon, and dragons have destroyed the world, and they're out trying to hunt the dragons down, but they're just doing what they would do biologically anyway. And understanding that helps us understand ourselves as human.
Yeah, absolutely. It's same as the X-Files. It's asking these questions. What it's the world around us, and we don't understand everything. And again, it always comes back to what is the monster actually. You can look at all these great texts like Stephen King. That Pennywise is just generational trauma. And the same can be said for Michael Myers in Halloween. He's a representation of trauma. He never goes away. He's always there. So this depression that is kind of following along, and we can do this with so many different kind of horrific characters, Nightmare on Elm Street, all these kinds of things that just follow around. But
all those good ones.
Yeah, all those Monsters of the Week things, I love them. I'm usually a big fan of the X-Files.
Yes.
Myself,
I think Signs was another really well written one. I think the movie had there was the Alien movie, or rather the movie Signs about the aliens, but I think it was a book first as well. Yeah, honestly, all of that stuff, horror can become so viscerally symbolic, and it reflects humanity sometimes at its clearest as well, at its most honest. And I really enjoy that. I think it's when you've got really dumb characters that you instead of being frightened, you're frustrated, and you're like, oh my God, the futility. Why are you not like, why did you open the book? Why did you read from the book?
It is. Again, it comes back to that, when we're looking at what we're doing, if we see people make dumb decisions, we immediately lose any, and we don't have pity. We just go, oh, you deserve it.
Yes. Yes. Love, Death, Robots is very good for that. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Love, Death, Robots is one of my favorite series. And if anyone wants to understand world building in a really succinct way, that is the show to watch and try and write. Trying to write like the people in that show instantly. You are given the premise, the characters, and the world so quickly because each episode's only about 15 minutes long. So it's the equivalent of a short story. But the richness of each world is like, oh my God, this needs to be a pilot for a bigger show. I love it and I need more.
Oh wow, there you go. So yeah, I need to check in with it. We haven't had Netflix for a while, so yeah, I remember watching. We had it here that first season, first aired a couple of ago. We watched a few of the episodes then, but yeah, no, I haven't checked with any of the new ones, but I do know, as I was saying, yeah, because a friend of mine was involved in that one, so yeah.
It's interesting though, because with different cultures, do you base most of your stuff in Australia?
Yeah, pretty much. So at least it's recognizably Australian, not everything, but a lot of it.
Yep.
I love those kind of exploitation movies as well. We've been backtracking through a whole bunch of those recently, and it's just so much fun and so much to be said in Australian horror as well about, you know, in with our own context, the hostility of our landscapes, the creature
Yes.
features, the
Yep.
social discourse that goes on around place and ownership and, you know, trespassing and so much
Mm.
just really good stuff that where we're still, you know, quite divided as a country ourselves, and, you know, so many vast spaces and questions about what is out there, I guess. So yeah,
I
I do
feel
like writing Australian horror for sure.
Australia has such a sharper attitude than I think a lot of other places do. Um, our responses to things are really unique. Like, for instance, when you said other certain people would push on and it leaves the audience frustrated, Australians will approach the dangerous animal. Like, we typically want to get closer to the dangerous thing because we all have a little bit of Steve Irwin in us. Um, or we're just genuinely fascinated. It's like a morbid fascination with something that could kill us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, I was a teenage kid. I used to actually do work experience at Australia Zoo. And we'd go out and catch snakes and all kinds of stuff as well. So yeah, absolutely, love that stuff. And I think that that kind of informs a lot. Like I'm really kind of fascinated with our encroachment into bush territories, the outback.
Mm.
Even my first story was a crocodile story. And I'm still kind of playing with more of those, like cicadas. When the cicada stopped singing was so, one of the comments is just the bush is alive, you know, with there. And I just kind of, is this what we know and love, and yeah. And I think what also comes with the Australian side of things is the viciousness of Australian horror. Like a lot of Australian horror movies
Mm.
have that very vicious kind of tone, and so do a lot of our horror books as well. Like
The first one I
is
think of is Wolf Creek.
yeah, absolutely. It's just, it's savage, you know,
Yeah.
and even again, there's that even though it's a human, is, you know, the monster is recognizably human. It's all about just the hostility of the landscape. You disappear into the outback, and, you know, never seen again kind of thing. And that's kind of that quote, you know, pretending it's a true story. And is it Ivan Milat, or is it Bradley Murdoch, the other murderer up there, the
I can't
English
remember.
one?
It's been so
Um,
long since I've looked at that stuff. I've been super
mm,
focused on Brisbane things lately.
yeah, absolutely. Brisbane's a great city as well. So,
There's
yeah,
there's a lot of darkness here that people don't realize as well, because we've got Wacol just around the corner.
yeah,
And there were orphanages and shelters right in Brisbane City, that are considered some of the most haunted places in Australia. So really
yeah,
fascinating stuff. Oh, and there was an insane asylum on Fraser Island.
yeah, yeah. There's so much around. It's all, you know, it's great. You know, you can look at over at St Helena's as well. Some of the darkness that went on there, and
Yes,
it's really
yes.
cool.
And
Yeah.
Logan itself, we one of the stories from last year was a little bit of what do you call it? Like an allegory on the two rivers running through Logan, Albert and Logan, and everything being named after Logan was named after a guy that was absolutely heinous with his abuse of the indigenous and the convicts that were in Logan. Like, he was horrendously brutal, and to not acknowledge that, to not be taught that so much in our history classes, it kind of does this whole city a bit of a disservice.
Yeah, and I don't think it's only just this city. It's a lot of Australia, isn't it? You know, a lot of these places that we're starting to see some of the names change now. But even then, there's still a lot of pushback on these things, and a lot of these people were mass murderers, and there's no nice way to look at that. And it's a case of facing that as well, and understanding that, you know, well, this was a genocide. This is, you know, this is what we did, and we have to own up to that. And if we brush it under the rug, there's never any reconciliation there. It's always just going to be, well, are you going to ignore it, or are you going to accept it? You know, it's one thing to say sorry, but if you don't do anything about those things, then there's no point. Basically, it's just the same as any other apology. You have to act on it, otherwise it's false. So yeah,
Gosh, it's you could write horror for Logan, but it could just be truth, and it would still come through as horror.
yeah, absolutely. And again, it comes back to, you know, it's that side of humanity that is something we can always talk about in literature. You know, whether you're talking about, you know, Lord of the Flies or Australian, it's always there. You know, it's this dual nature that we have. So
it's so fascinating. It's so, and as you said, horror seems to be a bit of an outlier as a genre. Like, a lot of people, they either really love it and they sink their teeth into it, or they won't ever read it at all. So it seems to be, it's quite polarizing, but it's one of, like I said, it's one of the clearest mirrors of humanity that we can find.
yeah, I agree.
So I could talk for hours on this stuff. I absolutely love it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm the same. My wife's the same. We were always doing reading, reviewing, talking horror. So yeah, no, we love it.
Oh, so good. Speaking of talking, what is your talk going to be about at the Logan Writers Festival this year?
So yeah, I'm really excited about this. My cat's just walked in. If she jumps up on my computer, I'm going to apologize.
No,
so
we love cats. We love cats. I think every author loves cats.
Yeah, she's not doing anything. I know she'll probably see her jump up in a sec. So sorry, distracted. My talk is going to be, oh, she's gone. Is going to be about I've called it the monstrous metaphor. The way we can talk about society and social issues through the metaphor of, I'm loosely calling it monsters. Obviously the human monster, the place as monster, the other is essentially what a lot of it's about. And so I'm still sort of debating a few ways of looking at that. I think the teacher side of me wants to try and make that interactive, but I'm not sure how that's going to work, having not presented this before. You know, it's whether I get some people in the audience to talk about things as well. But I kind of, the gist of it is basically to talk about how even some of our earliest, most famous horrors are totally representative of the world and the context of the time. A little bit about how I've explored those things, and how, you know, the monster as metaphor, which I think is a common way of looking at it, works in my fiction. And then perhaps giving people some how-to, some guides on how, if they want to explore with this speculative nature, how they can do that. Because I think it's that metaphor itself in the horror that helps it exist in any genre. You know, whether it's a science fiction story, whether it's a fantasy story, whether it's even romance, you know, you can have the horror in there, and it's something.
Oh, just look at 50 Shades.
Oh yeah, I haven't even read it, but yeah,
I wouldn't
I've
recommend.
But yeah.
It's,
so yeah, that's the talk.
That sounds very fascinating, and I believe you are on the Friday from memory.
Is it the 9th?
9th, yes.
Yeah, so yeah, the Friday.
So last year the festival was on the 10th and the 11th, which is the Friday and the Saturday. We always like to have it on the Friday because it allows all the schools to come as an excursion. So the kids get a day off school and the teachers get a little bit of a break because other people are teaching their students. But I sent messages out to everyone and I said it was still the 10th because it was still in my brain, but it is the 9th this year, 9th and 10th of September.
Really looking forward to it. Get out there, talk to some people, show them some stuff, talk about some of the books and the things I love that have done that. And yeah, so basically just to go there, have fun, and answer some questions, hopefully, for people. And if I can get some how-to in there, I always love a how-to.
Yes.
And yeah, because I think the people who are going to attend, they want to know whether it's something they want to actually try to send out there in the public themselves, or just in their own writing, their own practice, or they just have questions that when they're reading other books, say, oh, is this about this? Maybe it is, or maybe if you think that it is, because a lot of authors will tell you once it's in your head, it's yours, it's your interpretation, and what you take out of it is different to what I've put in, because it's your worldview at that point. So
I really like that. My editor said something similar once, because we were talking about the J.K. Rowling controversy, about how, a series, and I'm sure if it came out with any horror authors as well, like Stephen King, if he messed up big time, but he seems like a pretty decent kind of dude. So
yeah, which makes me very happy, because I've always loved Stephen King, and a little bit too much. I was always really grateful with Ben. I always missed the Harry Potter boat, and so when that happened, I was like, oh, phew! I didn't go and get a Harry Potter tattoo. Like,
I was heartbroken. So yeah, when all of that happened, well, I had a bit of a meltdown over it progressively, and my editor said, well, once you've released your work to the world, it's not entirely yours anymore. Like, everyone gets to interpret it and filter it how they want to. So after it is free from you, it's really no longer yours. It is the world's, and they get to add to it and see into it as they wish. What they see into it, you can either take on, or you can disassociate from.
and
But
I think this. Sorry, I'm talking.
no,
jumping.
you go.
But I think this is one of the things that has been so amazing with the Harry Potter controversy, or the J.K. Rowling controversy, is that while she individually has insisted on doubling down on these things, and far be it for me to have anything, but like it's pretty blatant. She's doubling down. There's no way.
We at the Writers Festival are very supportive of anyone in any positive community. I think the only thing we don't tolerate is intolerance.
Yeah, right. And I think that generally speaking, people mostly think like that. But what has been so good is that these, again, I never read the Harry Potter books. I missed it. I was kind of already reading other authors by that time, but which I'm grateful about now, as I was saying. But there's so much of this fan fiction stuff where they're going, oh no, we are making this character transsexual, and all these kinds of things that, like, you can just tell, like, the community's gone, well, no, look, we're distancing ourselves from the creator, but we're keeping the creations and what they mean to us. And I think there's something genuinely powerful in that, and saying that, what you're saying, once the characters are out there, well, no, we're free to interpret it. And you've only got to look at how many movies, books through down the years, we see reinterpretations of again and again and again and again and again.
Yes.
And we turn these characters, and we use these characters in other ways. And it's
no, absolutely. I think a really good example to go into classics, or something close to classics, is Tarzan. The original Tarzan books and the original author were horrendously racist. Like, they were atrociously racist. Like, really just full of not okay.
It's the same with Lovecraft in the horror genre, and
and the Lovecraftian crowd really just kind of ripped that away, and they were like, no, we don't agree with anything the author said. This is ours now.
That's right. Which is powerful.
Seeing that stuff remade, and seeing it readapted, I think is really powerful, because it takes good concepts and it takes good source material and takes away the parts of it that were needlessly harmful.
Absolutely. And again, there's always that argument, oh well, it was of the cultural context at the time, but like, especially with Lovecraft, no, even of the time, you were
It's
just an
so ignorant.
extraordinary racist. Like, dudes in
Yeah.
1915 were going, man, he's racist. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, there's no defending it, and it's just you
No.
just got to separate it and say, well, no, it's not acceptable. But even if
I
the
think if
idea of monsters coming from other places is kind of pretty evident in what you're saying, then yeah.
Yeah, I think if you go back beyond the 1700s, I swear that was the century that just messed everything up. But if you go beyond the 1700s, there was more acceptance of, various religions. There was more acceptance of homosexuality. There was more acceptance of people that identified in trans or as non-binary identities. There was like before the 1700s, people just like, that's John. That's what John does. We don't,
Yeah,
John's
right,
just
yeah.
part of the community and we're just going to deal with that. And like it was a non-event, or it was, something for a gossip paper, but it wasn't something to vilify someone for to the extent that it was when the 1700s and the dark ages in the 1700s just sort of messed everything up. That's my little rant over, but it's
over it on same page. So.
it's so good. I think the Lovecraftian crew is a really good example of that. Where do you get a lot of your inspiration
So
from?
I'm just losing you there.
Oh, sorry. Sometimes my internet crackles out and I turn into a robot.
No, that's okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, that's better.
Yep. Where do you get a lot of your inspiration from?
Oh, it's funny. I was reading a Neil Gaiman comic about this just the other day. I make it up. It's just, yeah. I don't know. Like, I think
are you more of a
brainstorming.
visual person? Like when you see something or when you see a new media, or are you more just like a dream and a concept person with things meshing together?
I just think I'm always thinking about things, and then sometimes I think, oh, that'd be rad, and then what can I do with that? I start asking those questions and looking back, turning it around, saying, okay, well, if I was to make this, where would that come from? How would someone find themselves in that position? There are some things where I've gone, okay, well, if I come up, like I want to have this kind of concept, what can I do? I've got a couple of things out on submission at the moment, which one of them is a very exploitation kind of thing. And I was like, oh, what if Wolf Creek was kind of crossed with Aliens or The Fly, and sort of mix those ideas. And so I'm hoping that can come and see the light of day soon. And there's also I've written a novel-length manuscript that I've also got out at the moment. I'm hoping to hear some good words on soon that is kind of takes that idea of the tragedy, really infuses it with horror, the Faustian tragedy, and then turns that into more of a tome. So I will think about those aspects of genre and those subgenres within genre. But yeah, typically it's just, what will I find to be a story that if I read it, I'd be like, yeah, that was awesome.
I like
really
that.
Make myself have fun. Like if someone said to me, oh, this book is about killer koalas and reality TV contestants, I'd be like, all right, have my money.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, so it's and hopefully, I don't know if we're able to bring some books to the festival.
Yes.
But,
yes. So you will have a stall there, and so if you want to hang out for the Friday and the Saturday before and after your talk, you are more than welcome to sell the books there, and also to take extra questions and just meet more people that might love you as their new favorite author.
Oh, that sounds like a good plan to me. So yeah, so that'd be awesome. And if anyone wants to ask me questions about those ideas and where they come from, you can see I'm very talkative, and I can talk about my passions all day, So that's one of those things that my wife is probably going, oh, shut up, we gotta go out. But yeah, so yeah, no, that's basically it. If I think a story is going to be fun, I like to write it. I like to read. I read a lot, and I read for fun.
Yeah.
So and that's what I want to read. I want people to read my books and go, man, I couldn't put that down. That was heaps of fun. I love having lots of tension in my stories, because you know, I think that's what makes you turn the page. You know, I'm really focused on building those things in. When I'll send something to a beta reader, I'll be like, is it tense? Is it tense? You know, does it make you want to turn the page? And I'm terrified of writing something that moves slowly. There's a, you know, those things, and that's what I love. And yeah, that's basically what I do. I just want to write something that I have fun writing, and that when I have to read it 57 times, I still enjoy reading. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I totally get that. Where can people find more of you, Zach?
Pretty simply on Twitter is probably the best place just to find me talking about my fiction, or just being involved in the horror community as a whole. If they just go Twitter, I think it's Ashford_Zachary. But if you type Zachary Ashford Twitter horror author, you'll find it quite easily. I'm kind of shutting down the website because I just am letting it go to waste, and everyone just goes to Twitter anyway. Yeah, if you check out YouTube, I've got a couple of readings on there. I've been on a few podcasts with Ghoulish and the Necronomy.com, analyzing horror movies and things like
I
that.
like that.
So yeah, I'm out there about online. If people want to find me on there, they can. My books, the easiest place to go is Amazon, the Great Necessary Evil, but you can also find them on bookshop.org, which will always funnel the money towards independent bookstores. And the really good bookshop in Logan up in Browns Plains
I love them.
my books. They are like, I say to people, if you're anywhere near Brisbane, you've got to go there. It is such a fantastic bookstore. Like, they have things that you don't expect to see in a little community bookstore in Australia. So
And they know where every single book is. It's just, it's magical.
Yeah, it's a really great place to go and just get lost for an hour or longer if you
Absolutely.
have the time. So
start swimming through books.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic. But yeah, so all those places you can find me. And that's pretty
Wonderful.
much it.
Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. Well, everyone, you can find Zach at Zachary Ashford, or Ashford_Zachary at Twitter. And you can find him at the Logan Writers Festival on the Friday, the 9th of September. And hopefully you'll hang around for the 10th of September too. It's going to be a fantastic time, guys. And you'll be able to ask Zach all of your questions about the horror genre. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, Zach, and have a good evening.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you on the day. Cheers.
Definitely. Bye.